Can you all hear me? I always start with a disambiguation because I have a very famous namesake, Jane Jacobs, who wrote the book Death and Life of Great American Cities. I'm not that one. But the thing I love about that one, and many people do love her, is that she really began not as an expert, but as a journalist, interested in her spot on the map, happened to be Greenwich Village, with a set of quite small ideas about how it could be different in city building, when there were very big ideas crashing their way through New York City, freeways, etc. And she's very inspirational for a moment like this, so I want to carry the real Jane Jacobs into the room, channel her in a little bit just before I begin. I want to really begin by thanking William Lim, Lena too, for many beautiful meals in the process of organising and thinking about this, and Dan, where's Dan? Dan Fang, for bringing us together today for this kind of reflection and for the presentations. It's been a very inspiring day for me, not as dissipated as you might think, very inspiring. Ideas, propositions, reflections and hopes. And I want us to join and thank Willie just at this minute. I've too, like Melissa, was part of the longer conversation, and she and I reflected at many times about, what would be needed of us in something which was not a conference where we came and said what we were the most expert about, but let that expertise go a little bit and reflected on something called Singaporean dreaming, what that might ask of us. And I think the speakers, and Dan, you as a curator of some of the art presentations, have done a really terrific job there. Singapore is a city of many visions, and Jet Wee's talk and the film Moving House reminds us that visions are what Singapore is about. Visions are strong, they're complete, they're often in Singapore infrastructural, and they're readily gobbled up by the political and bureaucratic discourse into more visions, the next vision, visions that are attained, goals that have been met, benchmarks that have been reached. We do not need any more visions in Singapore. Or maybe we do. But there's something going on in a context so full of visions to something called dreaming. You just have to go on the web and see how many Singaporean visions there are. Visions really belong to the planner and the bureaucrat and the politician. Visions are about complete pictures, scenarios, projected futures, modelled futures, aspirations. Visions are not flights of fancy. They are future thoughts of the rational and usually bureaucratic kind. These are what Lee Hui Min described as the oxymoronic pragmatic dreams. And this is what Quang Meng in Goes If We Dream Too Long is crushed by. As Prof. Wee Wan Ling's nuanced account noted, Quang Meng, the protagonist in If We Dream Too Long, is in a context of visioning which leaves him feeling as if, and he puts it like this, I have no real choice. It leaves him worrying that despite all the plans, all the progress, all the visions, and this is what Quang Meng says, what if nothing happens all my life long? Now, how could that be with all this activity, all this churn, all this change, all this visioning, that you might be left feeling so outside of it that nothing might happen all your life long. So how can a languid sense of being trapped flourish alongside all that nation building and visioning? How is it that playing a bit part as a clerk in that visioning machine, which is the job that Kwang Meng in If We Dream Too Long has, how can playing a bit part be not enough? Or alternatively, how can it lead to no time at all to dream, which was Melissa's problem? What goes, If We Dream Too Long suggests, is that the vision-generating nation does something to the protagonist's ability to dream. In this case, too many wrong kinds of dreams. You know, this character wants to be elsewhere, maybe New York, wants to even be a revolutionary or a freedom fighter. Anything would be better than being in the bit part that he is in the novel. But of course, Singapore is a nation unique in its visioning. Most of its political and bureaucratic generated dreams come true quickly and efficiently and to the good of Singaporeans, for the most part. I've just come from Edinburgh, where it's taken them 10 years and millions of dollars more to build one tram line. But what does such bureaucratically driven vision-making and realization do? It produces pride, it produces loyalty, gratitude, and duty, all appropriate emotions. But it may also suck the oxygen out of alternative future thinking, other kinds of thinking. That is, we must ask ourselves, as we have today, what place is there for dreaming in Singapore that does not belong to politicians and bureaucrats and business, but it has things to say, constructive things to say to each of those spheres. Think of Tan Soo Han's reflections on green building visions, which quickly turns it into regulations where there's a gap between the technique called green mark and the vision of a more sustainable built environment in Singapore, or the difficult dance of dreaming that Melissa spoke of, rightly joining with a pragmatic state vision out of her own dream to have environmental values. There is, of course, a more recent popular engagement with the idea of Singapore dreaming. We've seen a little bit of it today, and this is Colin Goh and Yen Yen Wu's film, Singapore Dreaming. And in Singapore Dreaming, we follow the Low family and their struggle to realize their aspirations, another kind of dream. And in their aspirational world, it's cars and condos. Very familiar kind of Singaporean futures thinking. Not quite dreaming, more hoping and aspiring. And in Singapore, often supported by prosperity theology and other kinds of ethics of how to live one's life, which means that, if you like, that kind of mode of dreaming readily and authentically ends up in a realm of consumption. You work not for the duty to a national vision or even a duty to an ethic, a Protestant ethic, whatever ethic. You work not for duty, but you work in order to get things that you've dreamt for. Now, this is a new ethic of effort and duty we must ask ourselves about. We must question that ethic, not as Singaporeans, but as people on this planet. We must question whether working to get money, to get things, this inexorable dream of consumption, is the right ethic for ourselves, for Singapore, for the environment as a whole. And again, I think Imran pointed out, sometimes our dreams end up feeling a lot like nightmares. And in fact, Colin Goh and Wu Yingyan are skeptical of this consumption dream themselves. I would like to pick up on Imran's thoughts on dreaming as a psychic event, both good and bad. The really interesting thing about that story is, of course, the dreams we remember are the nightmares, not the good ones. Nobody questions our right and our ability to dream such individual dreams. We cannot stop ourselves. But there is a third kind of dreaming, which I know well because I worked with Indigenous people for many years, and it's what Indigenous people call their worldview. It's a mythical thing, but it's also about what they're doing in the present. It's about the past, but it's also about future hopes. And it's about social and cultural duties. Now, all of these things are maintained and taught and represented through something called the dreaming. This is a mode of being in the world where one's responsibility is to speak again and again. In Indigenous people's culture, it's through song and dance and art and debate, but to speak again and again what is valued and what needs nurturing and remembering and repurposing and inventing. I see today's conversation as something like that practice, an urban, rational, fully modern version of dreaming. Speaking, seeing, creating an alternative Singapore and inquiring and challenging Singapore. Dreaming is not revolutionary. Dreaming is always tending towards harmonizing and reconciling. Past, present, future. Myth, reality. I also want to pick up on Imran's nightmare, his Chinese-inspired box into box into box. At core, there are a set of questions that also coursed through Li Humin's ideas of our pragmatic dreams presentation. And I'm going to finish on some of these questions. For me, the first one is, who is dreaming? Who gets into this activity of dreaming? Is it just the elite? And most of us in the room are actually a kind of variation on an elite. What about those economically dependent and disadvantaged and disenfranchised of Yu Yan's talk? In what interest do we dream? In duty to which Singapore are we dreaming? Who can dream for Singapore? Is it only Singaporeans? Not others who are in Singapore? Foreign workers? Invisibles? Are they the invisibles? Others outside of Singapore who dream of being like Singapore? What happens? How will Singapore comport itself in relation to these various dreamers and the alternative dreams that they hold? Lam Keong noted, what does it mean for growth? What would these dreams mean for growth? What kind of growth? What would that broader array of dreaming mean for aspiration? Could an appropriate duty be not to aspire, but to sacrifice? Sacrifice water and your need for it, for example. What does it mean for government? How might that government listen? How might it recalibrate its social compact? How might it deal with the grip of bureaucracy? So that it wasn't just, I like this point a lot, wasn't just sort of petty complaints and bureaucratic tweaking, but robust political debate. So what kind of dreams would change all of that? So this is my dream. I'm a foreign worker raising a family here in Singapore, working very hard with my NUS colleagues and my Yale colleagues to build a new higher education institution on the island. I dream that the Singapore dreamers do not feel that they have to go offshore to dream. That all people on the island of Singapore can dream. All people investing themselves in its future can dream for her and with her. But most of all, that we do not simply imagine that dreaming is about realizing dreams. Dreaming is about a practice of seeing anew, as we've done today, of speaking things anew, as we've done today, and eventually, after all that dreaming is done, doing things anew. Thanks, everyone.